let's make the paper piece stars for the Stars Above quilt. Each block of the quilt is going to have a star block that looks like this. Each star block has two sections, A and B, and there are two options for the paper piecing templates included with your pattern. There's a difference in the templates to make sure that you're able to press toward the darker fabric. The first option is for a light star fabric with a dark background fabric, and the second option is for a darker star fabric and a lighter background fabric, and that is the option I'm going to show you today. So print whichever template fits your fabric choices, but just be aware that the template you choose will determine which fabric you use first. So for this example today, our first fabric is 1 and is a background fabric. For the other template, your A1 is going to be your star fabric because that is the lighter fabric. We will start with section A of the star. On this template, A1 is our background fabric, so we will take our A1 fabric and we will place it right side down underneath the A1 section of our template. You want to make sure that the background fabric is covering the entire A1 section and a 1/4 inch on all sides. So for this template, our 1/4 inch is our seam allowance, and you'll just want to make sure that you have at least a 1/4 inch up here. All right, so then we fold back this template on the line between A1 and A2. Then we take our A2 star fabric and we place it right side up underneath the background fabric and this A2 section of our template. You again want to make sure that your A2 fabric is covering this entire A2 part of your template plus a 1/4 inch on all sides. I generally hold this up to the light or to a lamp to check and make sure that that's happening. Another option is something like this. This is a tracing light box, and you can turn on a light. And if you place your layers on top of this light, you will be able to see that my A2 section is covering this entire part of the template and that 1/4 inch. Okay, so I'm going to carefully move it off of this. And then I'm going to pin all 3 of those layers together so it doesn't shift while I take it to my sewing machine. I trim the seam allowance at this point in the process. You do not need to do this. If you like to leave the seam allowance and trim after you check if the fabric is placed correctly, that works too. If you are new to paper piecing, you might want to see how this next step works before choosing to trim or not. If you do trim, you line up your ruler to measure a 1/4 inch from the folded edge of your template, and then you just trim it. This saves me a step of going back and forth from the cutting mat to my sewing machine. And since this is a simple template, that's how I choose to do it. So now I'm going to go sew on this line between A1 and A2. I'm going to start in the seam allowance, end in the seam allowance. I'm going to back stitch at both ends, and I'm going to lower my stitch length to 1.6, I think it is on my machine, but just something slightly lower than what you would use for regular piecing. And those two things combined are going to help make pulling these papers out at the end a little bit easier. Okay, so this is the line that I just sewed. If you did not trim the seam allowance, that's this example, you can check and make sure that when you push your fabric toward the A2 section, that it's going to cover your entire template, and you can see that it does. So then this is where you will trim. Now you fold back on your same line that you sewed on, line up your ruler on the folded edge, measure a 1/4 inch, and trim. Okay, so now both of these are in the same place. We are going to use the seam roller to press today. We're going to press toward A2, press toward the new fabric, which in this case is the darker fabric, so you can see how that works. You can also use a hot dry iron, which is what I would normally do. Then we're going to turn it back over and we are going to trim this section of our paper piecing template. So you'll line up on the line and you are trimming on the dashed 1/4 inch seam allowance lines. And here I usually use a rotating cutting mat. It just makes the process a little bit quicker. Okay, and then you can carefully trim along this curved line. And if using a scissors feels more comfortable here, that is okay too. Okay, and we're going to leave the papers in for now and set this piece aside. Okay, moving on to section B. This section, again, is going to go together in a slightly different order if you're using the other template, but you just follow the numbers. So on this template, B1 is again background fabric. So we're going to take our background fabric and place it right side down. We always start right side down. And we're going to make sure that it covers the entire B1 section plus a 1/4 inch on all sides. So we have our 1/4 inch here on the curve, but you want to make sure you also have a 1/4 inch on this solid line and over here on this one. Okay, I'm going to turn this. We're going to fold back the line, fold back the paper on the line between B1 and B2. And then we're going to place our A2 star fabric right side up underneath our B1 background fabric and our A2 section of the template. And again, you're going to want to check and make sure that this entire section is covered, plus a 1/4 inch on all sides. And I suggest holding it up to a light of some sort. I can see that that is right. We're going to pin all 3 layers so it doesn't shift. And again, you can choose if you're going to trim at this point or if you're going to wait to trim until after you sew. Okay, so I am going to go sew on the line between B1 and B2. I'm going to start a little bit into this B3 star section, and I am going to finish in the seam allowance over here, and I'm going to backstitch at both ends. And this is going to make sure that when I finish this section, I don't end up with a hole right here in the center. Okay, so this is the line that I've sewn. We are going to turn it over and press toward the B2 fabric, which is the darker fabric. You can see that again. And then this section has 3 parts. So we are going to have another step. We're going to fold back on the line between B1 and B2 and this B3 star. Because you've stitched a little bit into the star section, you may have to rip the template just a bit to get it to fold perfectly on that line. This one is not trimmed, so then you could trim at this point. And then we are going to take our B3 star fabric and place it right side up underneath our fabric that's there in the B3 section of our template. And because of how this one works and it's a bigger piece of fabric, it's easier to tell that yes, it is covering a 1/4 inch on all sides plus our B3 section. I'm going to pin it so it doesn't shift. I'm going to trim. And then I'm going to go sew along that line. Okay, so we're going to turn our template over and we are going to press toward the B3 fabric, which is the darker fabric. And then we're going to trim this section of the template. We will finish the star by sewing the A and the B sections together. You're going to need to turn them around. The right sides of the star are on the back. We're going to place these two pieces right sides together. Okay, and this is why we left the papers in, so that we could see this seam allowance line here. So we are going to sew along this seam allowance with our lowered stitch length. We're going to backstitch at the beginning and end of the line, and I'm going to go do that now. All right, so you can see the line that I've sewn, and now we get to remove the papers. Carefully pull the papers out of the block. I usually leave the seam allowance paper until the end. Okay, so now we're going to press this block. I usually press this seam open so that I keep that darker fabric going toward the darker fabric, and so it creates less of a shadow over here. Again, you can use a hot dry iron for this as well. And then there it is. There's your star block. I usually prepare these sections in batches, and then I chain piece the sections. So I would take as many pins as I have, and I would prepare all of these different sections, and I'd go chain piece, and that way I can then spend less time moving between the cutting mat, the sewing machine, and the ironing board. It allows me to sew them all at one time, press them all at one time, and then remove the papers all at one time. So that is my advice to you if you want to make this slightly quicker and less tedious. Good luck, and message me or email me if you have any questions.